You are listening to The Art of Sales. Everyone sells every day, and this is your source for conversational, real-world sales and prospecting methods that you are comfortable using and that get results. You'll help people buy instead of pushing them into being sold. Here's your host, Art Sobczak.
Today we're going to talk about something that we haven't before on this show, and that's using cold email in your outreach and prospecting. For those of you who know me outside of this podcast through my training courses, my Inner Circle membership, our Smart Calling Facebook community, my weekly email tips, you likely know that I'm not a big believer in sending untargeted mass emails out. You know the ones that ask for 15 minutes of someone's time. And in fact, I actually despise those, and I look at them as spam. Now, with that said, when used properly, email can be a very effective tool in the prospecting process. And today's guest is an expert in that. In fact, that's how he got on this show. That's right. He cold emailed me, and then he followed up several times. Actually, we're going to talk about that. So today's guest is Jason Bay. He's the Chief Revenue Officer at Blissful Prospecting, where they help sales teams remove the stress from prospecting using the reply method, which he's going to be explaining to us. His sales experience dates back to 2008. Wow, all the way to 2008. At 19, he ran his first six-figure business painting houses while attending school at Oregon State University. I want to hear more about that. And he's worked with hundreds of sales reps and personally closed millions of dollars in revenue during his career. Jason, welcome.
I'm excited to be on. This is going to be fun, Art.
And I was joking about 2008 because that actually just seems like a couple years ago, but you were how old?
It doesn't seem that long ago.
How old were you in 2008?
So I was a freshman in college, so I was 19 years old.
Wow.
Still had braces.
Well, we're going to talk about how you got on the show here, but first, tell us a little bit more about let's go back to your first paid sales job, if it wasn't that one, painting houses.
Yeah, that was my first. So I went to school to be a forensic scientist, so I watched a lot of CSI and that sort of thing. And in the first couple of classes, I quickly figured out that it was nothing like the TV shows. And the way I heard about College Works Painting was someone just came into my class and said, hey, you want to make $10,000, this summer, working part-time in the spring, full-time in the summer, running a house painting business. And I honestly only signed up because of the money, because the summer prior, I stacked wood on a cart for 60 hours a week, to make about $5,000. So what really hooked me was it was actually a performance, 100% commission-based job, and I thought that was pretty cool. I was like, hey, so if I work harder and I'm better than other people at this, I'll make more money. And the way that we got started was going door to door. So that's how they train you. So I would drive back to Brookings, which is about 2.5 hours from where I went to school. And I would drive back home on Fridays, and then I'd hire teams of marketers. We'd go out and go door to door and see if people were interested in getting estimates. And then they taught me how to do the in-house, sort of sales too. So we'd do a 2-hour appointment. So that's where I learned about what sales actually was, what building rapport means, what an objection is, how to close, how to present and ask, interesting questions. I learned about the importance of product knowledge, right? Knowing about how painting works and how home improvement works. And that just got me hooked ever since.
So it seems to me that the personality type of somebody who goes into forensic science is quite a bit different than someone who goes into sales. So did you have any preconceived notions when you got into this sales position about objections and rejection and all those things that are typically perceived as negative?
I definitely did. I didn't really know anyone in sales growing up. In the town I grew up in, it was about 5,000 people. So I didn't really have a lot of access to people doing, sales at larger corporations. So I did have a couple family members. My grandma, my aunt ran small, sort of brick and mortar style businesses like a nail salon, and the one was other, kind of just selling apparel and that sort of thing. So they did selling there, and I never pictured myself going into sales because I just had the classic used car salesman type. Like, why would I want to be that guy that's like super pushy? Why would I want to be the person that makes a cold call and pisses people off? That was what I thought sales was. And And honestly, before I started doing College Works Painting, I didn't even really know exactly what I would be doing outside of running a painting business. So I didn't really understand that that was sales until we sat down and did trainings. So yeah, and I'm an introverted person too. So that was another misconception I had, is that I thought that you had to be a really great talker to be good at sales. And in reality, I'm sure you experience this, it's kind of the exact opposite, especially when you're prospecting. It's more about the questions you ask and how you engage the person than it is about giving them some big, long spiel.
Exactly. More about listening than talking and pitching. So let's fast forward then. How did you get into what you're doing now?
So I ended up working with College Works Painting all through college, and what got me really more interested in sales was that I got hired back on as a sales manager, and I would train other college students on how to run these businesses, and a large component of it is the marketing and the prospecting and sales part. So that got me really hooked, and I started doing trainings, and I would travel across the country when I graduated from college, and I would train the other divisions. They operate in about 35 other states, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then I eventually became their VP of sales. And then I was like, you know what? I want to leave this company and do what I'm doing right now, because I know a lot of other businesses need this. So that was when I got into business to business sales, and that was in 2013. And the natural thing I ran across that most consultants will is, if you don't know how to prospect, is the network dries up. I'd been to one too many meetups, and people were trying to sell me stuff more than I was able to actually sit down and meet with someone that was even a qualified prospect that I could help. So the targeting part, I was like, I'm just not talking to the right people. And then I read Predictable Revenue, which you've probably heard of if you're doing outbound. And that was like talking about cold email and this sort of thing. And I was one of those spammers when I first started doing cold email in 2013. That was just sending mass blast emails, and people were getting really angry and like, hey, did you do your research? And then I started really digging in and talking to people that were selling business to business and how they prospected. And it was exactly what you teach and what we teach in the Reply Method, where, hey, spend some time putting together that account list, do some research, have something to say, have some value to offer, know what their challenges are before you're going to reach out to them. And then as a consultant, I started getting clients that way. And then people naturally started asking, well, hey, Jason, that was really cool stuff that you did to reach out to us. Can you do it for us? I was like, oh, light bulb, right? And we started doing that with Blissful Prospecting, and now it's gravitated into doing prospecting for some people, and then also on the training side of things, working with individuals and reps and helping them implement cold email and this outbound thing and all that good stuff.
So tell the audience exactly what you did to contact me. So walk them through your cadence here, and then I'll give you my comments as to what I thought about each step in the process.
You took some persistence, Art. So the way that I approached getting on podcasts, I knew that social proof is really important for any company, and getting on a podcast and being able to talk with someone like yourself is a really great way to build social proof for our business. So I approached it just like you would prospecting any other campaign. I put together a list of around 72-ish. It was actually around 96 podcasts. Only 72 of them I could find the right email addresses for. And I said, hey, I'm going to create a 4-email sort of drip here, and I'm going to hyper personalize this as much as possible. And the way I did that with you is, and this might sound like a surprise to a lot of people, I actually listened to your podcast, and picked out something.
And actually, let me just jump in here. I probably get 3 to 4 inquiries a week from people that want to either be on the podcast or they want to get someone on the podcast. And I would say 80% of them don't listen to the podcast because they're pitching me something that is not even relevant. So, yeah. I mean, congrats for going above and beyond there.
Yeah. It's just like normal stuff, right? Like you and I will kind of roll our eyes and stuff. It's like, that's like the normal thing that you would want to do, because it's embarrassing to send a message that's not relevant to someone. Last thing I want to get is an email back from someone saying, do your research, man. So yeah, did the research, listened to a podcast, and recorded a personalized video and told you exactly what I got from it. I gave you some ideas, some things that we could talk about, and now we're talking.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to break it down to a more granular level here. So the first email you sent me said, I think the subject line was looking for podcast guests, I believe.
Yep, and I had your first name in the subject line as well.
Yeah, and then you also had in the body there, you said, I enjoy, again, I'm paraphrasing, I don't have it in front of me. I really enjoy the Art of Sales podcast. Matter of fact, I think you cited one episode, and you mentioned what you do, and then you had links to several other podcasts or articles or something with several different topics that looked like they could possibly be relevant. Now, so that was good. So that was better than 90% of the inquiries I get. But for those of you out there who are looking to get on the show, I can tell you that typically I don't respond to the first inquiry because I want to see if somebody's going to follow up. And most people don't follow up. And then you sent 2 more emails that I would put into the kind of cutesy category. That I think you had a picture of your dog.
Yep.
And I looked at that, and that really didn't compel me too much. And then I think it went maybe another couple weeks, and you sent another email. So you just didn't let it die. And this one I think had the video in it, right? Does that sound right?
The first one actually had the video, the very first email, but I kind of called back to that first email. So
that one was compelling, and then I was waiting for you to follow up, which you did. I think I might have gotten busy, so I didn't follow up with you. And then I waited for you to follow up a few more times, and then finally you wore me down a little bit, and I did take a look at your material. So I clicked around and I looked at it and I thought, this guy's got some good stuff. And I went back and I watched your video again, and you hit me at the right time. I mean, you never know when somebody's going to, be in the market for what we're selling.
Yeah.
So you hit me at the right time because I was definitely interested in using video in prospecting. So I replied back to you and mentioned that, and I said, send me some ideas over, which you did, and then we started up a dialogue. And not only did you get on the show, but Jason's also going to be doing a webinar for my Inner Circle members. So it definitely paid off here for you. Tell us exactly what your reply method is and how our audience can use it.
Definitely. So we came up with a framework because we were writing a lot of cold emails, and what we started out doing a lot of is writing the messaging for our clients and then sending it out on their behalf. And some of the big pain points we had in doing that is just it would take me like 8 hours to write an email sequence, which was too long, and it was also a challenge to troubleshoot emails that weren't getting a response for whatever reason. So we started looking at hey, what are the necessary components of just solid prospecting messaging in general, whether that's you're sending an email, you're recording a video, you're making a cold call, that sort of thing. And we came up with the reply method. So the way the reply method, do you want to go through each of the individual pieces of it? Okay, cool.
Yeah. How do we do it?
So the R stands for results. So essentially what we're doing here, and the reason why it starts with results, is you got to be really centered on what are the relevant results that you create for this prospect. So this reply method is already taking into consideration that you're doing some sort of segmentation. So I don't like any mass blast emails or cold calls of any sort. I typically will separate based on industry or niche or some sort of need where you can find patterns in what people are looking for. And then you want to share relevant results, because the prospect, when they get solicited from someone they don't know, is immediately thinking, what's in it for me? And all you're trying to do is not get them interested in your product or service and purchasing it, because that's just too far along the sales cycle. You're just trying to get them to say, this looks interesting, right? Enough to have a conversation or to email you back at least. So the key there is to share relevant results. So what you want to avoid, and what I hear people do a lot and see people do a lot, they'll send me cold emails and say, hey, we've done work with Amazon and Google. I'm like, okay, cool. We're not Amazon or Google. We're not a Fortune 50 company, and we don't do we're not even in the same space. Yeah, so they are mentioning companies that are not relevant to them, and they're also sharing results and case studies that are, or no case studies at all is what I see. They're not sharing anything that's relevant. So the way this came out in the email I sent you is I shared other podcasts I've been on that are sales podcasts about topics similar to the one that we could talk about. So you could actually sort of envision what it might be like to interview me. You need to get your prospects to envision a little bit about what it might be like to have you help them or to solve a problem for them. And the easiest way to do that is to share something that's relevant to them.
Yeah, so let's shine a light on this a little bit more, and I do this in training programs as well. What we always want to do is think about who is this person that I'm going to be approaching, and what is it that they want, or was it that they avoid? When you were targeting podcast hosts, how did you answer those questions? What was going through your mind in terms of what are the results that they're looking for?
Well, the biggest thing a podcaster wants is really quality content, right? And they want to talk to guests that their audience is going to be really excited about. And I know that, and this kind of gets into the next piece that we'll get into with empathy, but I know one of the big challenges, because I've run a podcast before, and any podcaster will tell you this, is not only finding quality guests, but once you have someone, it's a lot of work to figure out what you're going to talk to them about. So if I can get that part of the way out of there for you and do a little bit of due diligence up front, you're going to be a lot more receptive. It's easier to say yes. I'm making it easy for you to say yes to me.
Yeah, exactly. And again, the point I wanted to make here for salespeople is, this is where it has to start. Put yourself in the position of the person that you're calling. What's going on in their world? What do they want? What do they want to avoid? And that's exactly what Jason just explained here. Okay, so that takes us to the E.
So E is for empathy. So this is usually, there's a lot of pieces missing from cold emails that I see, but I would say this is missing the most. And I think it comes from a lack of understanding of what the person you're reaching out to actually does. So what you want to get to with this empathy piece is you want the prospect to go from, this person's not one of us, to, hey, you're speaking my language. And the way that you show that is through a couple different ways. One way is by acknowledging a challenge that they might have. And I like to get pretty deep here if I can. I call these 3D challenges. So there's 3 layers of challenges typically that prospects are having. There's challenges they experience on an account level. So their company might be experiencing something. So let's say I'm reaching out to, because we do prospecting for marketing agencies. And a lot of times they don't have the resources to do outbound. If I just say, hey, marketing agencies, a big challenge I hear they have is doing outbound, that's a very generic challenge that's not really going to relate to that prospect. If I take it a layer deeper and go into persona-based challenges, I could say, hey, a lot of directors of business development that we talk to tell us that one of their big challenges is finding enough time to do prospecting, particularly personalizing emails and sending those out at scale. Right? That's a very specific challenge that a lot of directors of business development have shared with me. And then the third layer into that is more situational challenges, and these are really where the gold is. And I'll give you another example, because we do some work with nonprofits too that do corporate development. So they want to connect with other companies. A big thing that I hear corporate development folks tell us is that, hey, they put together this big list of partners at the beginning of the month to reach out to, and then the end of the month rolls around and they didn't have time to build the list, find the contacts, personalize them, and then send them out and follow up. So it's a very specific situation that they encounter on a regular basis. And if you can call out one of these challenges when you're making a cold call or in an email in a sentence or two, people are usually going to be really receptive to that if it's something that's really a hot button thing for most of the types of personas, or most of the challenges, that persona is experiencing.
Out of those 3, do you find one is typically stronger than the others?
Yeah, situational challenges do the best. They're the hardest to get, though. You gotta do client interviews, and this is something that I don't see a lot of sales organizations doing. Is, hey, after you close a client, a couple weeks after you close them, do an interview and ask them why they responded to you in the first place, or why they came to you guys and what pain they were experiencing. And particularly, you want to figure out, what were you doing? How does our product or service interact and intersect with challenges that you're having over the course of your workday or work week, or if it's more of an executive type person, their quarter or their month. That's the hardest to get, but it's when you get it and you nail it, it works the best.
I don't want to hijack your process here, but essentially it's aligned with the smart calling process. And one thing that we suggest, and people that follow smart calling know this, is social engineering. And social engineering, for those of you that don't know, is calling into a company and talking to people other than the decision maker. And that's an excellent way to find out what's going on in their world, which falls into your situational challenge area. Because then when I know that, I can use that both in my email and my phone call. And by the way, for everybody else out there, if you haven't already picked up on this process works for the phone call as well as the email, because it doesn't matter what your messaging is.
The messaging is, oh yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask you what you sort of see, but with emails and calls, the more you can mirror the language together, the better it works, because you can email someone, and then when you make a call to them, you're going to reference things that you talked about in the email. You're going to use this personalization that you referenced. You're going to talk back, and you actually have something to say. So if you're going to send 6, 7, 8 emails and make 7, 8 cold calls over the course of 2 months, maybe, prospecting to someone, you won't run out of things to say if they're working together, instead of, hey, this is so-and-so, calling from so-and-so, give me a call back. That's like the voicemails people always leave, and they suck. They never get a response.
Yeah, totally agree. And speaking of voicemail, a good email message and an opening statement when you have somebody live and a voicemail should all be the same, just like you mentioned. And by the way, I'm not a big believer in changing up dramatically the messaging that you're leaving if it is really strong, because I believe in the same thing that radio advertisers do, repetition. Walmart does not change their catchphrase every day.
Yeah.
It works pretty well for them.
Yep.
All right. Okay. So we got the empathy. That is awesome. And my spelling is here. Oh, we got P.
So P is for personalization. So essentially, people are really smart about this these days. It's kind of hard to send stuff in mass and to hide the fact that it's a mass template. So things need to be personalized, and you need to show you did your homework. But there's a couple of specific things that you need to go after. Ideally, the personalization is connected to the empathy or the challenge, and also connected to the result. So for example, if you're a consultant and you're helping people with, stuff related to sustainability or the environment, if I can find some sort of initiative that a company has talked about in sustainability, I'm going to call that out in the personalization. I'm going to talk about that in the challenge. I'm also going to talk about that in the results. And then your call to action also can be very, related to that. So everything is connected together. So the personalization is really those first 2 sentences of the email. And you want to make sure that you're actually digging into something that's more than, I noticed we went to the same college, or, hey, I noticed you're a Cubs fan. Like that stuff, in my experience, I don't know what yours, Art, has been in this area, but it doesn't usually work that well unless it's related to your product or service in some sort of way, or a challenge that they're having.
Yeah, and actually it can work against you, because I've had people call me before. One guy called me up. He goes, "Hey, Art." Yeah, I didn't even know this guy. I didn't know who it was. Didn't recognize the company name on caller ID. And he just starts with, "Hey, Art." It's when I lived in Omaha. Omaha, huh? Yeah, Nebraska. Husker fan, huh? Husker, go Big Red. And I'm going, what an ass this guy is.
Yeah.
Right? And let me just clarify something too here for you analyticals out there that are going, okay, REP, these can all be tied in together. It's not like they're separate. Like you said, they're connected. So when I'm talking about the empathy, when I'm talking about what's going on in your world, I can say, so Jason, I understand that what you're experiencing in your department is.
Yep. And I love that, especially in a call, I always like, hey, the reason for my call is, it's on your website, notice this, or hey, notice that you guys are hiring SDRs right now. One of the big challenges I hear from SDR managers is, ramping up their sales reps is sometimes a challenge, and they'd like to do it a little quicker for whatever reason. One of the ways we can help is this, like you're connecting everything together to what you're seeing.
Okay, great, loving it. So the L.
L is for laser focus. So the big thing with emails is, and I see trends towards people making them even shorter than this, but our general rule of thumb is needs to be less than 120 words or 3 to 5 sentences. And if it's longer than that, it better be really, really good. So it needs to be concise. And if you're leaving a voicemail, anything like that, less than 30 seconds is ideal for a voicemail. But less than 120 words, 3 to 5 sentences, and make sure the call to action is singular. Don't ask the prospect to do more than one thing in the email. So don't have multiple things that you want them to do. Have one clear ask. That could be to hop on a call, could ask, hey, is this something that's on your radar right now? Or, hey, check out this piece of content. Like, make sure it's a singular ask. Make it really easy for the prospect to do what it is that you're trying to ask them to do.
And I've talked before that I've always been reluctant to ask for something in an initial contact, simply because we haven't earned the right to do so, particularly if there hasn't been back and forth interaction. That's why I suggest people don't ask for the appointment in an opening statement, because all we're trying to do at that point is just earn the right to get to the next 10 seconds. However, I can see the exception here, because if we've done everything else right up to this point, this is actually kind of like a direct response piece of copy where I pulled you in, I personalized it, I've got you interested, got you leaning in, and now it's kind of like, okay, what next? And if you can make a reasonable request and you have that person in that frame of mind, then sure, that's going to have a good chance of, if not working right at that moment, keeping the door open, like it did with you, to the future communication.
Yeah, I think mine in that first email was something like, hey, is this something your audience would find valuable? That was the call to action. So a little more open-ended. It's less pressure for you to say yes or no, because a lot of people they're kind of repelled when people ask them for their time up front when they don't know them. So it could be an open-ended ask as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Matter of fact, I'm going to do probably an episode, an article, or video on, hi, my name's Art, can I have $200? Because if I just contact somebody and out of the blue, I say, can I have 15 minutes of your time? Depending on what your time's worth, it's just like saying, can I have $200 or $1,000 or whatever that is. Kind of ridiculous.
Yep.
Okay.
So laser focus, and then our why is for you. So what you really, and again, this is what I see in a lot of emails, is a lot of the emails about the product or the service, and it's very me-centric versus prospect-centric. So if you're using the word I a lot in any sort of prospecting messaging, you probably need to revisit and look at the drawing board and make sure that you're using you and your more times than you're using the word I. The thing that I always like to say is that prospects, no one wants to be Alfred, everyone wants to be Batman. So you need to make the prospect the hero, not your product or service.
So, loving your process here, do you have an example that you could share with us, kind of like a start to finish?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll use an example of, let me think. Okay. So this is a good one. I'll use one of our prospecting emails. And again, one of our types of clients, one of our ICPs is nonprofits. And just to explain that a little bit more, they do corporate development and they prospect to other companies to do corporate partnerships. So if I was sending an email to you, Art, it might sound something like this. Hey, Art, was just poking around on your website and noticed that on your 2018 impact report, that corporate partners and raising that bar to 40% of your guys' revenue is a really big focus this year. And the reason I was reaching out is that a lot of the challenges we hear from development teams is, they want more corporate partners, but for whatever reason, they're really struggling to either find time to do more prospecting to find them, or they just aren't able to make the connections with people outside of their personal network. Wasn't sure if this is something you're dealing with right now, but we're working with a nonprofit, Keep Your Breast Foundation. We've connected them with companies like REI, Victoria's Secret, and that sort of thing. Here's their case study. Is this something you'd be interested in chatting further about? That's pretty close from start to finish to a cold email we'd send to a nonprofit.
Now, if somebody would just look at that without really diving into it, they might say, well, geez, that's kind of long. I mean, here's the thing, and I say this about opening statements as well. Long isn't a function of number of words. Too long is a function of too boring.
Yep.
And if you've done all of the steps in your reply method up to that point, every single sentence is going to be captivating and pulling that person into it all the way to the end. If it's all about them and what's going on in their world, no, it's not too long. But if somebody sends an email that clearly is just a mass blast and it's only 2 sentences, that's way too long.
Yeah. And the other thing, too, is that a lot of times when we're writing email messaging, we start out with a cold call talk track. So we actually write out and figure out what we would say in a cold call first, and that messaging translates really well into an email. So it's actually really good. If you're nailing it with cold calls, you're going to do really well with cold email because the messaging is just very, very similar, and it's a good start.
Well, we prefer to call it smart calls here, Jason.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm like cold calls. It's like, because really the way that we do it a lot is warm calls where we're emailing people once or twice and seeing if they open the emails, and then we're focusing a lot of the effort on calling those people. So yeah, I agree with you. You shouldn't really be in the sense cold calling someone that you don't know anything about.
Talk about the cadence is a popular word here,
Yep.
but really it's how do you use email in combination with making a phone call, and in what order? Describe your experience and what you recommend.
Yeah, so when you're building a cadence, it's really, there's no secret formula to building a cadence. I can give you some general rules of thumb and what works well when we approach building a cadence. And you gotta kind of adjust it to your personal style, so what you like doing, and then obviously, hopefully you're measuring through some sort of sales engagement platform what is actually working well. So what we typically recommend is a 10 to 12 touch cadence over the course of 30 to 40 days. So what that's going to have in there is a combination of email and phone. And then if you want to do a little bit extra, you could throw in social as well. But InsideSales.com, SalesLoft, Outreach, all the sales engagement platforms, all the studies they've done on cadences will tell you that multi-channel works usually twice as well as doing single-channel prospecting. So if you had to pick two, make sure that you're doing at least the phone and the email. So the way that cadence structure works usually is what we'll do is send emails first. So we'll send 1 or 2 emails. And let's say we email 100 prospects over the course of a week. We're only going to call the people that actually are opening and engaging with the emails. So we'll set up some sort of workflow trigger where if someone opens up an email twice, it'll create a task for us to call them. And then when we call them, we can say things like, hey, this is Jason with Blissful Prospecting. Does that sound familiar? Does that ring a bell? And if they recently opened up the email, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, you sent the email. Or be like, maybe, I don't know. Typically, they're a little more receptive. So I will typically, over that 10 to 12 touches, do 6 emails. We'll do 3 to 4 touches over the phone. And a lot of the times, if you don't have direct dials, that's probably leaving voicemails. And then throw in 1 or 2 social touches as well. So
what would the social touch be?
Social touch is as simple as sending a personalized connection request on LinkedIn, and then you're liking or commenting on stuff that they're posting. And a lot of people, depends on your industry, are maybe not very active on LinkedIn at all, so it might just be a personalized connection request. But I'm not trying to set the meeting up through LinkedIn unless the person responds. And I just had a prospect recently, actually. That's the easiest way to get a hold of them is through LinkedIn. So you're doing multi-channel because you don't know what a person's preferred method of communication is.
And let me just reemphasize what Jason said there. Personalized LinkedIn connection request. Personalized, not just a generic. So that is so important. All right. The 10 to 12 touches with email, what kind of things are you putting in those?
So the way that I structure the cadence is around value props. So typically I'll have 2 or 3 angles that I want to take with a company. So I'll use us as an example again. So one of the value props that we have is around saving time with prospecting. Another one is around increasing the effectiveness of the outreach. And then there's a third one around some of the processes and workflows. So my first email will be geared towards that first value prop. It'll talk about challenges that we might be able to help them with around increasing the productivity and the output, let's say, of their sales team. And then when I call them, I'm going to reference and talk about that same messaging from that first email, and I'm going to use the personalization I put in that first email. And then and then I'll usually have an email after that that's a short follow-up. And then the third email will be focused on that second value prop. And this way, every time I call someone, I have something new to say to them. It's not just the same thing over and over and over again. And the big thing that I see people making a mistake of is they say, hey, we can help you with this, this, and this in the first email or voicemail, and then they have nothing else to follow up with the person about.
So when you're setting these up, are you setting up an automated campaign where you've got all these emails scheduled, or are you sitting down and writing each one individually? And I know you're not recreating the wheel every time, but is it something where you're doing for that person and writing it or copying it and then hitting send?
So the answer is there's a mix. So the way that I segment our outreach is we have dream clients that we're going after that are really high profile logos. And then we have sort of the mid-tier clients where we have to play a little bit more of a volume game. So we'll do more personalization for those dream clients. So I'll hit send on that first email. And then I might personalize 2 or 3 other touches in there in terms of the emails with something. For most of the stuff, we're not personalizing every touch. The first touch is going to be the most personalized, and I'm going to point back to that. So that's where you can take advantage of a sales engagement platform where it's going to help you automate some of the sending of those, and you got to spread them out so it looks a little normal. And the other thing too is when you're creating a cadence of best practices, send out all of the emails, even if you're going to automate them, send them all out manually first, because a lot of times what you would send in a follow-up is a lot different than how you would write a follow-up, because you actually have to hit send and see it and feel the embarrassment if it's bad, right? So oftentimes you change it. So I recommend personally hitting send the first time you're building a cadence, and then build the templates and that sort of thing based on you manually doing it the first couple times.
All right. Jason, you've given us so much value here. Thank you so much for this. And again, the reply method. So to summarize, you want to make sure you're talking about results, not just features or benefits or how great you are. You want to have empathy, and you've got 3 different levels of empathy using Jason's 3D method there, which is the account level, the persona, and situational. Of course, you want to personalize it all throughout. You want to make it laser focused as far as what you are asking for, your call to action, and make sure you're using you as much as you can, because who are people most interested in? Themselves. All right. So, Jason, thank you so much, and I do look forward to having you on our Inner Circle webinar, where we're going to go into more detail here, where we're going to show the video that you actually sent to me and break this down. For now, everybody, we have a regular feature. Those of you that have been with us for a while, so you know what time it is.
Your attitude will be iron every way, you'll never fear what they say. It's the art of the sales quote of the day.
That's right. Time for the quote of the day. And Jason, I'd imagine that you've been inspired by a lot of people in your life. So what's one of your favorite quotes, and tell us why it's important to you?
Yeah, one of my favorites is from Albert Einstein. It's, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And this is so relevant in sales, because some of the best salespeople, out there, like your people running huge tech companies, like your Steve Jobs, back in the day, Elon Musk, whoever you want to put in there, they're really good at explaining concepts that are really complicated in a very simple way. And if you can't explain what your product or service is in layman's terms without all the technical jargon, you're not explaining it well enough. The burden is on you as a salesperson to explain what you do in a very easily digestible way. And for prospects just not getting it, that's on you.
Too many times salespeople over-engineer it. They tie themselves into knots and confuse everybody. Matter of fact, there's a great quote or story in the book I've got on my shelf here, Made to Stick, where the authors talk about the curse of knowledge. And the curse of knowledge is when we're so close to something, we even can't fathom how everybody doesn't know what we know. And you did a great job of explaining your process there. So thank you so much for that. And please share with our audience contact information and links and any offers that you might have if they want to get more of you.
Definitely. So we talked a lot about the reply method, and if you're listening to this, you're probably at the gym or driving or something. So I put together a one-page guide that you can download, and it's got the reply method on one page. You can print it out, put it in your desktop, that sort of thing. And that's at blissfulprospecting.com/art. So blissfulprospecting.com/art. You can grab that. And that's sort of the best way is to get the content there. Go to our website, and you can get an idea of what we do for free, just because we got a lot of guides and content. And if you're interested, we do one-on-one training, group trainings with teams, that sort of thing, if you're wanting help applying the reply method. But the best way is just check out the free stuff and see if you vibe with it.
All right. And we'll have that link in the show notes as well. Jason, once again, thank you so much. You brought tremendous value here, so I greatly appreciate that. Look forward to having you on our Inner Circle webinar at the end of the month. And for all of you out there, if you're getting value from this show on a regular basis, please do share it with a couple other colleagues. They'll appreciate it, and so will I. Send them to the show site, theartofsales.com. theartofsales.com. And thank you for sharing or investing your valuable sales time with us today. Until next time, I'm Art Sutton.